Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining our session. At the Cloud, how ready are you? My name is Jason. I will be getting our presentation started. Let me see my screen here. Okay. Hi, everyone. So we'll be presenting today on Path to Cloud and organizational readiness for transformational projects, as it's a hot topic in the marketplace today. First, we'll go through some agenda quickly items, introductions for myself and Arjun and Alir. We'll talk about organizational readiness for Oracle Cloud, and then we'll deep dive into some implementation best practices to help your organization set its foot forward correctly for your future transformation projects. We'll review some next steps, and then finally we'll save some time for questions. First, a little bit about Alir, the company that Arjun and I work for, Oracle partner, celebrating 16 years of business in May. We focus on partnering with Oracle across all of their products. So we have practices for Oracle Cloud, PeopleSoft, EBS, and then advisory services helping customers with strategic decision-making processes and improvement initiatives. We really try to be helping clients get the most out of their processes and tools with technology, not just implementation of services. We look for strategic guidance. We pride ourselves on being a trusted advisor and building long-term relationships. We are very familiar with the Oracle product teams and have worked with them closely over our 16-year duration, and look forward to presenting with you all today. Quickly highlighting a few other sessions that Alir will be presenting at. One more later this afternoon, 2 sessions tomorrow, and then 2 more sessions on Thursday. Let you all read those. A couple around project management on Thursday, both from a actual project perspective, and then I'll be reviewing the actual cloud project portfolio management solution and giving you a couple of case studies there, which are really interesting. So please check that out. A little bit more information about myself. I've been working in the Oracle solution space for just over 10 years. I started in the PeopleSoft solution world with implementations and upgrades, and the last 4 or 5 years I've been exclusively working on Oracle Cloud implementations and roadmap initiatives, helping clients make strategic decisions about this topic today. Are you ready to move to cloud? Does it make sense? We try to put metrics behind feelings and come up with the right solution for the long term for them. So Arjun.
Thanks, Jason. Hi, everyone. This is Arjun Krishna Prasad here. I'm the lead for the strategic advisory services practice at Alir. I have overall about 15 years of experience. I started my career as a technical consultant implementing Oracle e-business suite, and later moved on to Oracle Cloud, focusing on roadmaps, transformation, high-level architecture, design, and solution. Over to you, Jason.
Thanks, Arjun. So organizational readiness for cloud, what is that? In the marketplace, we kind of hear these 3 major themes of questions come around is, are you prepared? Are you ready? Where are you right now? Organizations are struggling to make the decision. They're struggling to understand, is it the right time for them? What's the purpose behind the major investment? There's a lot of key factors that need to be undertaken for making this journey, as we'll say. So from our experience in working with customers and helping them with the process, we've really channeled it all into 2 different buckets. And that's really finding the right reason and the right time to do this. And some of the themes that we found for the right reason are reducing your infrastructure and technology costs, so those hard costs, moving to an agile workspace, obsolete legacy applications, potentially homegrown applications, things that are falling out of support, things that are costly to maintain, things that just need to be revamped and re-looked at as it's been 20 plus years as it was created, and then looking to have a centralized system. Those are kind of some of the right reasons we found, and then obviously right time, aligning to a new normal, moving out of the support for your current applications, potentially an organization restructuring due to M&A activity, and looking to improve business function and operational efficiency. And then the greatest curveball we had last year with moving to a fully working remote environment, organizations that weren't ready for that or had the ability for their workforce to be offsite really struggled. And now they're making strategic decisions about reducing that tie to the office and having that more agile workspace. So from our perspective and the information that we found, these are definitely good reasons to start building the business case for doing a transformational project. Now, why we think Oracle is a great solution. Oracle Cloud is built on the modern best practice. So you'll hear them, the Oracle teams speak about this, the product development teams, and what they mean by a modern best practice is they're building it to evolve and be flexible. It's going to support growth and innovation. It's not locking into a specific cookie cutter dry sort of process, but it's enabled flexibility, keeping it simple, and it's really allowing organizations to see change and adopt new features and functionality. The amount of updates and enhancements that come with the application once you're on the product that are pushed to you seamlessly is really allowing it to be kind of that best of breed solution. So that's kind of what the modern best practice is. And companies really want to see this and adopt this kind of solution to find the value from a software investment. So how do you get there? Where do you start? Similarly, I've heard great things about the blank whiteboard, which we're showing here, and saying every organization is going to be different. We need to figure out what's best for your organization and go from there. So understand there's no one way. Consider a fresh start and really build the roadmap, which is going to work for your organization. We're going to review a bunch of key implementation best practices, but it's something that every company is going to need to know what amount of change they can adopt at one time, what's unique about their business that's going to take the most time for it to be reapplied into a future state. But it's really taking an opportunity to not just lift and shift what's done today, but really rethink what can be done in the future. A cloud solution is going to be great for companies looking to get more value out of a standard software solution, and taking time to plan your journey and create that roadmap is going to be really important. June? June, I think you're on mute.
Thanks, Jason. So what is this journey going to look like? Here's the path to your transformation broken down to 3 phases, starting with move to cloud. This involves changing your manual disconnected legacy system to a full suite cloud application, which is both future ready and incorporates modern best practices that Jason mentioned. A streamlined process becomes the backbone for your transformation. The next phase would be to optimize your cloud capabilities. Analytics leverages historical data and provides meaningful insights. It focuses on identifying trends, outliers, and gives you predictive analysis, costs, and effects. Enhanced data analytics can be used to better understand and improve business performance. Finally, the phase would be to advance your digital capabilities with emerging technologies like AI, Internet of Things, machine learning, and blockchain. For example, chatbots have become very popular, and it's a high impact areas within the enterprise as a use case. So starting with move to cloud, what does that look like? Now let's focus on some of the implementation best practices for our phase 1 transformation. Next slide, Jason. So having the right strategy. So what does having the right strategy means? Following the best practices for cloud implementation means having the right strategy for business process redesign, data conversions, integrations, security, reporting, and change management. So let's start with the business process redesign and see what are the steps that involves going through this from a strategy perspective.
Thanks, Arjun. So a strategy for business process redesign, and we really fold this into a 3-step process, is a mobilization where a company can really take a deep dive look at the current state, and then focus on understanding what the future state will be adopting to, because this is going to impact the biggest part of your redesign. And then understanding what's the impact of other initiatives that are going on in your organization. How are your user groups going to be effective? How are different departments going to be affected? Really documenting all of that. Gather requirements, establish guiding principles is key to any of these being successful, and then stakeholder alignment. Once that is completed, you can move into a thoughtful design where you're really going to map out your processes and find your areas of most need for the redesign. Again, the purpose is not to lift and shift your current state into the future state. It's really to take a hard look at your current state and say, how can we align to these modern best practices that the solution we're moving to is going to be providing for us, so we can get the most value out of our implementation project? And then what do we need to change to make that achievable? So we do this through a facilitated design process. And then finally, you would deliver and understand your future state and have your stakeholder alignment to potentially move on to your next step of your project. This is a good strategy to make sure is completed prior to an actual implementation of software solution beginning, so you can get your teams ready, as this is not necessarily related specifically just to software. This is about your organization and having the proper principles in place for this future solution that you're moving to. So how is this successful? Some key factors. Looking at the future state software to drive the process. Cross-functional mapping. So business process mapping is critical to understanding that future state. You can take a deep dive look at how your processes will align with the software solution, and getting to that lower level cross-functional map will allow your teams to see all the required information points and identify that. As much detail as you can capture is the better. We feel like that's really important. As you're doing this type of analysis, make sure you do it thoughtfully and well. And then those guiding principles, what's the purpose? What's the objectives? What are we trying to accomplish with the redesign? Because that is going to be your driving force for the change. So where do we see this fall down? Having stakeholders that are missing the knowledge of that future process. They didn't take not taking the time to learn the future state is going to be critical. And if that doesn't happen, you potentially will run into issues there. Obviously, resistance to change is scary and something that needs to be addressed, but make sure your stakeholders are aligned and positive thinking about this future state so that they can correctly do this process. And then ultimately just a lack of vision for that future. Make sure you have stakeholders participating that understand what the purpose of the project is. Again, going back to the guiding principles will be critical for this being successful. Our next best practice is change management. So taking that redesign is going to lead right into the change management process, as you've identified your key impact areas, and now it's a matter of putting that into place. Change management is something that needs to be embedded into your implementation projects. Having a clear and precise methodology for addressing change management on your project is going to be critical. Again, we have an example of a methodology for deploying a change management solution. Again, it should be very clear and precise with objectives and activities, and clear phases to move through that should line up with an implementation project. Change management's about training, communication, and change identification. Make sure you have change champions identified, an assessment to address your high impact change items, and then solutions in place to address the communications and the training that need to relate to those things as you move through your project. Beyond that, specific tools can be put into place to help address proper communication channels are addressed and distributed during the project. Training is created, conducted, and tracked throughout the project, and then a plan is in place at the end of the project to keep that material up to date as you move through the remainder of your future state and stabilization. Again, how do we be successful with this? What are some key principles, key constraints? Key principles, again, training and communication is part of change management. Make sure resources are dedicated to those two things on your large scale initiatives to be successful. Training is not a one-time event. We like to talk about the 5 moments of truth in terms of someone understanding what the content is going to be delivered to them and really being able to retain that information. It needs to be repeated multiple times and potentially through multiple channels, not just one email, not just one webinar, not just one lab session. It needs to be what's going to be the most impactful to the user group and repeatable and digestible information that they can see multiple times throughout the duration of the project so that the training is impactful and your user group is ready for their future state during the go live of your project. This kind of goes to the next thing. Information needs to be repeated. So your communications should be delivered through multiple channels, email, verbal, newsletters, whatever your internet might have and your internal marketing initiatives might do. Take advantage of those resources because you're going to want to make sure that your user group is informed of what's going on during this project. So where does this change management usually have issues with some of our key constraints? Really, we see a lot of clients underestimating the amount of work and resources that are going to be required for training and communication. Generally, it's one of the first things to go on most projects due to budget constraints or lack of resource assignment, but it's almost one of the most important for projects to be successful from a preparedness and readiness standpoint. Getting people's attention and then dealing with too much change at one time. Getting people's attention, it goes back to making sure the information is distributed through multiple channels and often. So it's not just, one email is not going to be sufficient. It needs to be through different channels at different key points of your project timeline so people can be ready for the future state. And then trying to do too much at one time. We all know change is hard and changing the way we do things is hard, but help your teams through this and making sure that you're asking them for the right amount of work to do during the project with their future state, knowing that they already have a job to do is really important. And then we'll have our June walk through the next two.
Thanks, Jason. Data conversions. It's important to start thinking of data conversions as early as possible in your implementation. So for data conversion, the strategy would be to focus on your end state solution, how that looks like, and it will help you determine your scope, prepare, extract, and load the data. Few things to consider while defining the scope are the data sources, the types of transaction that you want to consider, whether you want to load top of stack, partial, or a full history of data, and the volume of data. As you prepare, you need to analyze the data, identify scenarios, map the fields, and finalize the tools for data extraction. For the extraction program itself, writing modular code based on various components, finalize validation, and the transformation logic is key. Determining the transfer mechanism for data, for the data files, and making sure that it's encrypted in rest and motion is one of the key aspects of the data file transfers. Load is more an iterative process, and it involves staging, loading, fixing errors, and reconciling the data and making sure you have the right information in your new system. So for conversions. Some key principles are aligning your conversions to the overall project timeline, finalizing your conversion scope, making sure you have a good thought strategy, especially in multi-pillar projects, which involves HCM, ERP, and supply chain, where you have data dependencies across these pillars. It's important to make sure that you have a solid thought strategy. Data in the legacy system, the quality of the data in your legacy system plays an important role. Have an agreed and approved data cleansing process, and you have the right team for your validation. Few key constraints that we have seen and that we need to keep in mind while defining your conversion strategy are the availability and the quality of the data in your legacy system, the infrastructure that you want to code your extraction program, the time and the resource for data analysis, cleansing, and reconciliation. Moving on to integration strategy. Jason. Thank you. For your integration strategy, you start with the integration inventory in your current state, define your end state, and determine your scope, prepare, develop, and then finally test. In your end state, determine the future state architecture, plan for interim solution until you reach your end state, put a timeline for decommissioning your legacy applications and related integrations. Few things to consider while defining the scope are the integration patterns, whether it's a changes only file or a full file, whether you need any additional information from other systems, types of transaction, volume, and the schedule. As you prepare, you need to finalize the appropriate tool, engage those application owners, write those functional specifications, map the fields, and list those test cases, and make sure that you create a good sample data for your testing. Key activities during your development are integration tracking, making sure you unit test your program, orchestration of the data, the security around the data transfer, and standard error handling mechanism. Internally, testing is an iterative process, similar to your conversion data load. It is a process of functional validation, identifying those issues in your code, and making sure you have it ready for your system integration testing, and eventually for your vendor testing or your end-to-end system validation, and then getting a sign-off from the client team is important. So some of the guiding principles to keep in mind while you finalize your integration strategy are assigning the right integration pattern, utilizing out-of-box capabilities wherever possible, and incorporating adequate level of security at all stages of data transmission. Standardizing the error handling and notification helps to make sure you have like a unified solution for your error handling, determining the integration tracking mechanism, and accounting for production in your performance in your production load. Some of the key factors that impact your integration strategy are the alignment of the integration timeline with your overall project plan, making sure you have the right team size to make sure that you're able to develop all your integrations within your project timeline. Finalizing that integration inventory early on in the project when you do your readiness or preparedness for your implementation or transformation. Configuring your application modules on time with the necessary specs based on what you want from your process. Preparing the test data for unit and integration testing, and identifying the environment needs for your integration applications. Now, moving on to our reporting strategy. So for your reporting strategy, start with the organization's reporting requirements by defining the end state, identifying your scope, preparing for that, developing and determining the right operational model. In your end state, focus on managing accuracy of the data using the right technology, access, and security. Few things to consider while preparing is that you need to finalize the appropriate tools, engage business users, gather reporting specs, make sure you map the fields, and list those test cases. In your development phase, consider leveraging your Oracle Cloud out-of-box reporting capabilities. And Oracle provides a lot of these reporting out-of-box, and most of the time we tend to forget to use those existing reports and try to create custom reports. We need to first look at using those existing reports before moving on to customizing or creating those custom reports. Creating the right layouts and using those appropriate subject areas and testing that for accuracy of the data. For your day-to-day operation, establish a guideline for maintaining those reports, end-user support, security, and enhancements. So there are a few guidelines that we would follow for our reporting strategy. So defining a data governance, using delivered reports, as I mentioned earlier, and the cloud functionality, utilizing the right reporting tool and for your specific reporting needs, utilizing reports from the Cloud Customer Connect, developing a reporting strategy team because it's going to be an ongoing process, and report organization, which involves two aspects: designing your reports and user profiles based on your business need, and classifying reports to manage accessibility and security. So talking about security, we need to focus on our security strategy throughout the course of our implementation. While defining your system security, you need to ask the question, who can do what on which set of data? That is, who are the users, what privileges they will have on what set of data. There are two primary types of role. Both control the functions a user can perform and where within the application they have access. Starting with abstract roles, an abstract role represents the people in the organization independent of their jobs they perform. An example would be an employee or a line manager or a payroll analyst. A job role represents the user's what he performs in an organization, such as a HR specialist or an account payables manager. Security profiles are used to define what data can be accessed by the users in those assigned roles. Data roles combine security profiles with the abstract role or a job role to kind of determine the overall access level within the system for a user. So having the right strategy for security and conversions and business process and change management overall is key for your cloud implementation. Some guidelines as you go through your security setups. Incorporating security, like I said, throughout the design, starting along with all your other strategies. Security should be thought of when you're doing your data conversions, when you're integration. So making sure that you're incorporating security in your overall design. Assigning security profiles directly to those abstract roles, creating custom job roles and applying those security profiles only when needed, and limiting those custom roles is important. Considering personalizations wherever possible to restrict access is something that we should consider instead of creating those additional custom roles. Thanks, Jason.
Thanks, Arjun. So kind of in conclusion, really important to look at these different strategies we went in depth in for your organization, how you're going to be managing these different items for your project, and having a proper plan in place is critical for success. If you do have more interest in any of these topics more about cloud readiness, we have some more information on the Alere blog. Get involved with the Blessed Oracle community, and then obviously check out Oracle Customer Connect, which is a great resource for anything Oracle Cloud related. Again, thank you for your time today. My name is Jason. We also had Arjun on. We do have about a minute left if there are any questions. Arjun, do you see anything in the chat?
I don't see any questions at this point, no. No, I don't see any, Jason.
Okay. Well, thank you everyone for your time. We really appreciate it. Have a wonderful conference and a wonderful day.
Thank you, guys.